Welcome to OpalesqueTV. Today we have Sefi Shliselberg, President of the Women in Sovereign Entities organization. Sefi, can you tell us about your organization, the mission and goals? I think a lot of our viewers are unfamiliar with the organization and what you do.
Sure. Women in Sovereign Entities, or WSE, is the first women-focused organization for the sovereign financial sector. So when I say the sovereign financial sector, I'm referring to organizations like central banks, ministries of finance, sovereign wealth funds, public pension funds, development banks, multilateral financial institutions, just to give you a sense. WSE recognizes the leading role that many of these women who are underrepresented in sovereign financial entities play in the sector. Our mission is really to provide them with a forum for connection and affiliation, for sharing best practices, and for supporting their leadership and development. So we call that connect, inform, and empower.
And when you were considering founding this organization, what was your motivation? What were you trying to accomplish?
By supporting sovereign women's leadership and enhancing understanding of the sector, we will help them to strengthen their domestic policy frameworks and institutions, which would lead to better public policy and a more high-performing global financial leadership. Really what happened was I had been working on Wall Street in the financial sector for many years, and in the course of that time I got to meet with men and women in central banks, sovereign wealth funds, and other sovereign entities. And one of the things that I realized was, first, there weren't that many women, and that the women didn't seem to know one another. And I was very surprised to learn that there was no organization that really gave these women a voice, considering the critical role that they play in the sector.
How would you compare yourself to other women's organizations in financial markets?
There are a handful of organizations that I'm aware of. There's the Financial Women's Association, 100 Women in Hedge Funds, and other organizations like that. But what distinguishes women in sovereign entities from these other organizations is the other organizations focus on the private sector largely, and Women in Sovereign Entities is the only organization that is really focused exclusively on women in the sovereign financial, or the public sector, if you will. So, and it addresses their specific interests and needs. So, for example, the women in the sovereign community are interested in learning more and staying on top of current trends and developments in the sovereign sector. They're interested in learning more about the different types of sovereign entities. They are interested in connecting with one another and sharing best practices. In terms of the significance of the sovereign sector is extremely significant. They account for over $29 trillion in assets and cash reserves, which approximately is 40% of the global economy. And they have significant influence in global financial markets and in formulating and implementing monetary policy.
So how do you plan on advancing women's leadership and advancing their role in the sovereign sector?
That's a really good question. There is research that shows that there's a tremendous opportunity to cultivate ongoing learning and leadership competencies by forming tight-knit cohorts that model learning communities. So what we're doing is exactly that. We're forming a community among the sovereign women in order to engage them in discussion about some of the challenges they face in their leadership and in advancing their careers. That's point number one. Secondly, in talking to prominent sovereign women leaders, some of the feedback we have received is that it's very important for women to be able to connect with each other, and that will help them to be able to be more successful in the sector.
You're creating a network of women who are in the industry. What's your starting point? Do you have a membership, a current membership, and who is that comprised of?
Right, so we have a network. First I want to just say that we are an inclusive organization. So although we're focused on women, men who are in the sovereign financial sector who support our mission and goals are welcome as well. We have a network of over 1,000 sovereign women globally who are managers, professionals, and executives at the various institutions I mentioned before. And what we're doing is we have a range of programs available, as well as content, educational and news content on our website, which is www.thewse.org. Some of the programs that we're looking forward to include a leadership development series that we're rolling out in 2015. We're also hosting our inaugural event on December 2nd on the impact of innovation on the efficacy of central banks, featuring a roster of very outstanding sovereign leaders, including Lord Mervyn King, the former governor of the Bank of England, who joined our advisory board this past spring.
So, Sefi, give me some examples of women who are leaders in the sovereign sector.
Janet Yellen, for example, the head of the Federal Reserve System. Zeti Akhtar Aziz, who is the head of the Central Bank of Malaysia. Elvira Nabiullina, Central Bank of Russia. Governor Jill Marcus, the head of the Reserve Bank of South Africa. Governor Karnit Flug. In many cases, these women are the first women to head up their central bank. Governor Karnit Flug, who's the head of the Central Bank of Israel. And then some wonderful additional examples would be Lena Mulholland, who is the head of the Bank of Botswana, Jeanette Semelier, who's the head of the Central Bank of Aruba, and there are several more.
And how can other organizations work with the WSE to enhance your goals?
Great. So we are looking to connect with leading institutions, hedge funds, private equity firms, other major global financial institutions who have an interest in supporting gender diversity, in improving public policy, and creating a more high-performing financial leadership. We are very fortunate to have 3 such financial institutions who are already sponsoring us, namely Allianz Global Investors, Bank of New York Mellon, and UBS, and we're looking forward to connecting with other institutions who are interested in promoting gender diversity in the sovereign sector.
Looking into the future, 5-10 years down the road, what do you see as the future for the organization?
Well, I think there's a lot of challenges and opportunities for us, and I'll give you a few examples. On average, in the OECD countries, women account for 50% of central government jobs, but only 29% of top management positions. That's one fact. Second fact is there are 157 central banks globally. Of those, women head up 19. There are 19 women heads of central banks, which is only 12%. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to really advance women's leadership, and I think that equal access to power, to decision-making and leadership is not just a matter of fairness, good governance, and democracy. It can lead to increased stability and more equitable and sustainable growth and development. For example, the OECD has found a higher level of political instability in countries where women's access to the public sector is more restricted. And finally, by systematically excluding half of the global population, clearly the talent and insights of these citizens is not being tapped. So I think that there are a lot of opportunities to grow women's leadership and advancement in the sovereign financial sector.
And as far as our audience, who are alternative investment-centric investors and managers, how do you view their incorporation into the organization?
Well, I think that alternative investments, including hedge funds and private equity firms and funds, are very, very of interest to the sovereign sector. A lot of sovereign wealth funds have an alternative investment portfolio, and so they are critically important to the hedge fund and private equity community. They're significant, sophisticated investors, and I think that's really one of the opportunities. The second opportunity, of course, is to support increased gender diversity, which leads to a better financial leadership.